You don't just read my lyrics and be like, oh, I get it. For me, it's the frame, it's the texture of the brush, it's the colors.
Everything has to be cohesive. Everything has to be on the same level.
It wasn't like, oh, I want to hurry up and do it. Like, I enjoyed figuring it all out.
This piece of creative support is sponsored by Tape It, the iPhone recording app designed for musicians by musicians. First thing I want to say in this video is that I get it. It's not unusual that if you have different ways you want to express yourself through your creative work and different ideas that you might want to execute on, that often these interests or ideas are going to feel like they're competing with each other and leaving you feeling overwhelmed, or that when you're putting time into one thing, it feels like you're letting the other one go.
Art is just about creating a world, an atmosphere, you know, an ecosystem, all of that. Like, art is just what you make it. So I want everything to be like, to complement each other.
There's a culture online at the moment which is just another form of a certain type of approach rearing its head, and it's coming along at the moment with ideas around monk mode or language of locking in, or maybe if you're really cringy, the winter arc. This culture around locking into something and grinding it through in a kind of white-knuckled approach can appeal to that smaller part of ourselves that wants to kind of grip and control the things that we want to do and push forward through them in that kind of simplistic, heroic, all about willpower and self-agency fashion.
It's always interesting to test, you know, to test those the way you've done it before. Is there a new way or an old way that works better? We don't know until we test it. But to assume there's the one way is never the case. You never know.
Where isolating and locking in might work if we're trying to do a knowable task, accessing our best creative work is not that process, and trying to come at it with that kind of maybe short term, maybe rushing or trying to grip at it approach is a way that we can constantly bring forth those ideas of frustration around outcomes, or constantly feeling like we're not rushing on with our projects enough.
When like a kid could just be like, I want to make a song like Pokey Dokey, and just go to YouTube and do a tutorial. And to me, while that is kind of cool, you never develop your own thing because like you don't spend the time figuring shit out.
Just before we jump in and explore what those multidisciplinary artists might have to teach us about better ways to manage our multiple interests, I want to tell you about a properly exciting sponsor that I've got for this video, and that's Tape It, the iPhone recording app made for musicians by musicians. If you're anything like me, or all the people I know who make music, then the Voice Memos app on your phone is a ridiculously long list of random notes and song demos with all kinds of naming and all kinds of audio qualities. We all know there's magic in there sometimes, but that long list of notes can become overwhelming. You can lose stuff, and when you're actually putting down an idea, sometimes it can feel like it lacks importance, as if you're writing on a spare piece of paper and putting it under your bed. I got in touch with Tape It because I feel like they are really trying to solve that problem there. Bringing back importance to those recordings that you cared enough to make, and allowing you to get the best results, categorize them, listen back to them, and share stuff around in a way that feels more useful and just less random. The app has a week-long free trial, so if you're sitting here and you can imagine your own use case for Tape It, go and download it and give it a go. This is the first company that I've reached out to directly because I think it really could add value to some people in this audience. So if you are interested, go check it out. And with all that said, thanks for listening, and let's get into the video. I think when I was trying to think about that conflict or overwhelm that creatives feel when they have multiple interests and different paths they might want to go with their creative work, one question kept coming into my mind: what's the rush? When we feel some fear or insecurity about our creative passion, it can cause us to narrow our minds and try and look for those things that we really can control. This may well be based around false ideas that a lot of the culture can put out around us about the necessity to make it or achieve something in a certain amount of time. But when we look at artists in all different kinds of disciplines, we can see that these concepts about making it or having to achieve something at a certain age really are false.
To know if an artist or not is like a breathing. You don't question breathing. You have to breathe, otherwise you just die, so you breathe. So if you wake up in the morning and you have some ideas and you have this urge to create, you're definitely an artist. And also, I think the great artists have to be ready to fail, which is not too many people do. Because when you have success in a certain way, then and the public accept you in a certain way, you start somehow involuntarily reproducing the same images, the same type of work, and you're not risking. And the real artists, always change their territories and they go to the land they've never been.
But when you're doing something creative and shit and everything feels too easy, that's a red flag,
right.
Yo. Anything worth being historical, being something new, traditional, anything like just doing the impossible, it takes sacrifice and it takes risk. So it's a lot of risks that kind of don't comply with traditional policies, but make sense for the future. And sometimes, like I said, those dare taking risks, those risks is what kind of gets it done. And man, that's what keeps me hungry.
This is where I wanted to come to the idea of thinking about our creative work, less like something that needs to be held on too tight and ground through and always got absolutely right, and more like a kind of gardener approaching their greenhouse who's just looking to cultivate different things. The gardener doesn't try and grab the flowers or plants and pull them out the ground more quickly by focusing hard on them. They recognize the different areas that they need to tend to at different times and understand that there's different seasons that they operate through and do different jobs in different areas. We can think of building that wider greenhouse that brings in all the different aspects of our creative work and different interests, whether that's painting, music, writing, whatever it is. There's lots of different varieties of that style and that aesthetic, but they all exist as part of one ecosystem. And although the sections are different, when you pull back and look at the garden as a whole, you can recognize that that style and aesthetic is being cultivated and grown and fed between all the different areas.
You don't just read my lyrics and be like, oh, I get it. Like, I'm not that type of rapper. Like, you watch the video and hear the beat and hear when the drums leave and how I'm moving, and you're like, oh. That's why I like people seeing me live, because it's like, damn, I understand it now. So when you're like, well, has your writing got better? Well, yes, because I've also gotten better musically. So for me, it's not just lyrics. I don't think I'm like a Earl Sweatshirt or like a Jay-Z or something like that.
Yes.
Like you gotta look at the whole thing when it comes to me.
But I think that I want everything to kind of align and look together. So the music has to match the outfit has to match the lifestyle. I'm aesthetic driven.
That idea that we can't go around grabbing onto things and trying to pull them out with some sort of heroic willpower or focus really pulls us away from those shorter term rushing kind of feelings and allows us to step back and recognize that our work and our style, if we're just there for it and we cultivate it, we're in a positive and nurturing attitude, will develop over time. And there'll be systems at play that we can't control that are going to have an effect on that work and are going to evolve it in ways that are unforeseen for us, but will in the end give it its value.
Music for me, and especially songwriting, is a kind of abstract way of articulating loss. Music has that extraordinary potential of taking extremely complex things and sort of packaging it in a in a universal language that we can all kind of understand.
Do you find that writing is like working out? The more they write, the more in shape they get? Or is it that the inspiration just randomly, a song will come out of the blue?
I think both are true. I think there is a writing muscle that when you practice it, you get better. And the more you do it, the better it is. That said, there are these moments of inspiration that are outside of that realm where something comes and it's not based on your practice, or if it is based on your practice, it's some tangential, it's not just another day. It's not doing your daily office hours of writing.
Right.
Something else happens, but you can't depend on those. You can't wait for those. So it really is, both are true.
It's easy to see artists who do different kinds of work as generalists and losing the focus of drilling down on that one single thing. But I don't actually think that's true. By developing slowly and having the patience of being committed, we can have time to build a whole approach and that aesthetic or style that we're aiming for here. When we offer our art to an audience, whatever that is, at the end of the day, we're putting forward that whole approach, that culture or aesthetic, and that's not something that you can fake. That's why every truly good skate brand starts within the culture, and the best videos about skating aren't about necessarily the people who are the most technical or who can jump down the most stairs, but the ones who are obviously embedded in that culture and live it as a part of their lives.
But if you're not curious, then, or if I wasn't curious, then I don't think I'd be vulnerable and open enough to find myself in those situations. Without the curiosity, the rest of it kind of can't happen. I always used to say that I learned about punk because I was seduced by the clothes. It was like I really was into punk, and I used to go hear all these punk bands.
Yeah.
But it was the look of the punk.
Yeah.
The kids that were into punk, the way they looked is how I got into a club to hear a band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the album cover art,
Yeah.
that's how I got to hear the music. So it was still aesthetic or visual that brought me into it. But I do think, I'm inspired by a lot of different things: art, music, fashion, literature.
When you spend one season working on your piano, then another painting or reading and writing, you aren't specialising in any particular medium, but you're specialising in growing your aesthetic and your style. I'd love to hear other people's takes on this, but with my work, I know over the last decade, my writing, video editing, music has all been worked on at different times, but is actually developing one path at the end of the day. In short, the things we do, they don't have to feel like they're conflicting with each other. When we spend time on something and then jump to another one, they are feeding that overall sense of perspective and having a wide variety of ways that we try and access what our voice or perspective or aesthetic or style really is in our work is actually just going to help us carve that central and valuable thing out.
Look, this is what I always say about art.
Go on.
Okay, art has many rooms. Many rooms, and in that big giant house with all those different rooms, there's room for everybody. There's room for Banksy, there's room for Damien, there's room for David Hockney, there's room for Bridget Riley, there's room for Francis Bacon, there's room for Edward Monk, there's room everywhere, and every time there isn't room, you just add another room on, and there they go. It's art.
I said at the end here I wanted to give a slightly different piece of really practical advice, and that comes around our ability to enact focus on a single activity when we do prioritise it. I learned a lot about this recently when I was trying to build an EP project, and it's something I've slipped up on before in a big way, taking on that idea of projects having to compete with each other and jumping from one to another, leaving things incomplete. The reality is, when we zoom out and have that longer term knowledge that we're still going to be here over time and everything we want to execute in the long run can be looked at, we can actually zoom in then more powerfully and focus on executing single projects without having to feel rushed or like things are competing with each other. The EP was a great example of this in my own journey here. And yeah, I've built a 2-video series about it, which I'm going to link on the screen in a minute. Just before that, a huge shout out to the paid subscribers who help support these videos and get some of these videos early, along with the ability to send me directly the things they're struggling with in their own work, so that I can feed those into the stuff that I make here. Come check that out if you might be interested. I'm going to link that video series that goes into this topic about prioritization in a lot more depth. Yeah, that's on the screen now if you're interested. Thanks for watching this piece. I do hope you enjoyed it and got some value here. And yeah, good luck in your own work. Speak soon.